So you guys voted country, city, suburb. A lot of people on opposite ends of the spectrum. A lot of people say either country or city. A couple people said suburb, get the best of both worlds. But in this aim, we're going to talk about urban planning. So we're going to talk about what a city looked like in these ancient times in river valley civilizations, particularly the Indus River Valley, and we can see kind of the building blocks of what we see in modern cities today, even way back then, and that's kind of what we're looking at today. So here we go. First, some vocab. I will give you guys a second. Copy this down real quick. All right. So while you finish up, one of the things we like to kind of touch on is, what are some examples of each of the six characteristics of civilization? So back in AIM 2.3, we talked about what, makes a civilization a civilization. What does it have to have? One of those things is a writing system. So here's the writing system for the Indus River Valley. Sanskrit. Now, a couple of unique things about the Sanskrit language. Number one, it's a written language and it's spoken. Okay, so it's different from some of the other lessons in the fact that hieroglyphics, for example, in Egypt, that's only a written language. No one speaks hieroglyphics. um, Sanskrit is a written and spoken language, so that's the first thing that's unique about it as compared to all the other languages. The other thing that's unique about it is it's based on an alphabet, not pictorial symbols. So in these other languages, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, and hieratic script, these are pictorial languages. So it's not phonetically built the way our language is built. So Sanskrit is actually more similar to modern English than any of the other languages that we have kind of touched upon so far. So just to recap, if we ask you what is unique about Sanskrit compared to the languages of the other river valley civilizations, number one, it's written and spoken, not just written. And number two, it's based on an alphabet, not just pictorial symbols. So those are the important parts that we definitely need to know. Okay, next vocab. I'll give you guys a second on this. So typically, when we think about a city, I think this is what we think about. We think about the infrastructure, and what that means is these are the things that make up the physical city. So these are the buildings and structures and equipment, roads, irrigation systems, bridges, tunnels, toll booths, sidewalks, subway systems, etc. All of these things are the pieces and parts and building blocks of the city itself, right? So infrastructure, and we can use infrastructure in reference to really, anything. The infrastructure of our school, the buildings, the desks, the chairs, the hallways, the doors, etc. So infrastructure is a word that we will use, but in particular to cities, when we were talking about infrastructure, we were talking about the actual things that you need in order for a city to kind of function, and that is the infrastructure. So infrastructure is also like hospitals and schools and stuff like that when you're talking about the infrastructure of a city. Because obviously, if we're going to have these big population centers, we need to have these other, services and things like that for the people there to use. So you need to have these things. You need to have hospitals. You need to have fire departments and police departments as well. Well, that's a different story, I suppose. But you need to have most of these things in order to just kind of exist and keep the city up and running safely. So that's infrastructure. And that's another important vocab word. We're going to work with that a little bit today also. So one more slide here. I'll give you a second. So in cities, we usually see evidence of what's called urban planning. Urban planning is essentially the design and arrangement of all of these pieces of infrastructure that allow a city or a society in general to operate. So, you know, there's a reason why certain things are set up a certain way. Okay. The easiest example to look at when kind of looking at examples of urban planning is Manhattan. The island of Manhattan, one of the five boroughs of New York City, is great evidence of urban planning. The first thing we could say about Manhattan is The cool thing about Manhattan is we can drop you on any corner in Manhattan, and with very basic know-how, you can navigate your way to, a particular place that we ask you to go to, because the city is set up in a grid-like pattern, and with streets and avenues, and everything's numbered, and you pretty much have a good idea about how to get from one place to the other without necessarily having the directions. Navigating around, Newburgh and large city school district, our school district is an entirely different story altogether. It's filled with back roads and twisty, turny, windy roads, and up this mountain and down that mountain, and etc. So you don't see the same evidence of urban planning here. Once you get into the city of Newburgh, you do see that evidence of urban planning, where, Broadway, and then we have all the streets that run parallel, right? And then all the streets that run kind of perpendicular to that. So you see that grid-like pattern. So what you're seeing here, an example for these pictures, is this picture on the left is a computer recreation of the city of Harappa in the Indus River Valley. And what you see on the right is the ruins of Harappa. So you can see, what they did was they looked at the ruins and they figured out how to recreate kind of computer like CGI what that city would have looked like. And this is kind of what they've come up with. So you can see some of the evidence of the things we're talking about as far as that grid-like pattern and the way the city's laid out with a lot of right angles and things like that. So the evidence of urban planning that we typically associate with cities, this stuff is being seen in these cities in the Indus River Valley, in 2000 BC, just the neighborhood. So that's something to look out for. So we'll